Hey, it's Sandeep.
Hey, it's Patrick. Welcome to Moments of Brilliance, a podcast about life, laughter, and raising daughters. Happy Friday, everybody. It is, of course, Friday, October the 13th. Somehow it's October already, and Halloween is almost here. I don't know how that happened. And it is also Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
That's right. Thank you to those who have already liked and subscribed to the show. We appreciate any of you who like and subscribe. That sends it out to anybody else who has not heard us yet. And maybe there's a lot of really interested listeners out there. I am happy to say we are now officially on Apple Podcasts. So for those of you, that's a wonderful thing. A lot of people listen on Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening on another program and you want to listen on Apple, go ahead and do it. So last week,
That being said, we are also on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Amazon Music, and a bunch of other ones too. So you can find us almost anywhere now, including YouTube podcasts, because this one is a YouTube podcast.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So last week, we had a great discussion about the first year after our children were born. And I think we learned a lot of good stuff last week. We got some really good comments on the show. Lots of people liking the format. Lots of people saying how it really resonated with them in their first year. So I think keep those comments coming. We like them. We use them. And we're doing everything we can to get better every week. So keep them coming. On today's
for sure.
Yes. On today's show, we are going to be talking about the time before diapers and daycare. What does that mean? We're talking about our past, our childhoods. We wanted to step back in time a little bit and sort of give you a sense of who we are and how we learned some of our parenting styles through good and or bad things that our parents maybe did. But before we get into that, Sandeep, how was your week? Anything exciting going on?
Well, we had that meet the teacher night last night. How was that for you?
It was interesting. You definitely see some interesting parents, and you start to learn why some kids are the way they are. So you see some very interesting similarities in some parents and kids. Some good, some less good. But certainly it's always interesting to hear some of the conversations that people are having with their teacher. But other than that, I think it was a pretty good night.
Yeah, it was fun, right? Patrick and I and the families got together and we had dinner before we went over to the school, and luckily it was just a short walk. We went there and it was like nice and warm and like springish weather, fallish weather almost. And we come back and it almost felt like winter. Oh man, we were eating like ice cream on the way home, and everyone was just like, "Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this?"
Yeah, our children wanted ice cream, and I don't know why they wanted ice cream, but my daughter would eat ice cream 24/7, so that's totally fine.
Yeah. It was a interesting night. Lots of kids, lots of teachers, and it was fun. It was nice to see the kids showing us the classroom. And this is the second year that they're doing it because they're in senior kindergarten, but I don't know about you, but it was nice to see that she had a lot more, at least my daughter did, a lot more like confidence walking us around the classroom and saying, "Hey, we do this here, we do that here, and our teacher teaches this." And it was cool to see. Whereas compared to last year in junior kindergarten, she was just a little bit more timid and shy while she was walking us around.
Yeah, it was the same for me as well. Really good. Really, mostly we just wanted to go talk to the teacher, find out how our daughter is, because I don't know about a lot of you out there, but when our daughter comes home, we're like, "What did you do today?" "Played." "Nothing." So it was good to hear what they're actually doing and to hear how how our kid actually is in school, because, we used to get feedback when she was in daycare that, "Oh, we always know when she's not here because it's so quiet in the class." And now apparently she's doing much better and is able to kind of contain herself and actually sit and listen, and which made me pretty happy. So I was happy to hear about that.
You know what? That's a good point. I felt the same way. Like I didn't know what my child was doing at school every day because I got the same answers. Like we played, or I played with this so and so or so and so. So one day I like contacted the teacher, and she was so nice. She has a great teacher. Our kids don't have the same teachers, by the way, if anyone's wondering. So my my kid's teacher emailed me right back, or actually called me during her lunch break. So I was quite amazed because she has, I assume they have such a busy day and such a short amount of lunch period. And she called me back and she's like, she broke it down for me, like what their curriculum was and, how it's more play based. And, it was a little bit of an eye opener. So for any dads out there that are wondering or concerned that, what the, what is my kid up to? Or you don't know what they're doing all day, hopefully your teacher will break it down for you
Yeah.
and you'll have, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Ours definitely said give her a call anytime. She'd love to talk to us, and it's great
nice.
because the EA in our class, or the ECE, I guess it's called. She's always willing to talk. We see her in the morning when we drop our daughter off for before school, and she's always willing to talk and tell us how things are going. So, ask your teacher. Don't be afraid to talk to them. They're quite happy to talk to you.
Definitely. Let's kick it off,
All
Patrick.
right. So, well, we've got some interesting questions this week. So, I'm going to start off. So, Sandeep, what was your childhood like? What were your parents like? What were you kind of like as a kid, as a teenager? What was that like? What were you like?
All right. Well, that's a full spectrum of questions.
Keep it simple for today.
Yeah, I'll keep it very high level. My parents, they're immigrants and they came here in the late 70s. I have an Indian background and there was a huge Indian population in Africa at the time. So my parents were actually born in Africa. They both immigrated here in the late 70s, I think about 79. And me and my older brother, I have three brothers, by the way. I'm the middle child. Me and my older brother were born in the 80s. So the 80s, 90s is where we grew up. Mainly the 90s is what I remember. Commodore 64s, Super Nintendos, and, playing outdoors and just being outside, playing with your neighbor friends. And that's how I grew up. And then we lived in Markham, Ontario. I was born in Scarborough, but we moved really early on. Went to Markham, Ontario. Spent probably I was probably about 8 or 9. Probably just when I finished grade 3, we moved to another school in Markham. So it was probably like 10 minutes down the road. But really amazing times. I remember everything, almost everything. Even my kindergarten teacher's name, Miss Robertson. Um, I don't know if you remember your kindergarten teacher's name,
Actually,
but
do. Her name was Mrs. Soper. I don't know how I remember that. So, yes, I
hey,
do.
you're not as old as you think.
I still am old, but we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah, so moved to Markham to another school in Markham, but surprisingly, I still have friends from both schools. So I have a friend from kindergarten that he's my best friend. He's been my best man. Yeah, we're still really good friends. Um, and then, as the years went on, as I progressed as a teenager, I was one of those. I kept my nose clean. I didn't get into any trouble that people would talk about. I got into internal troubles and things like that with my friends and all that. So I was one of those kids who got up to no good. Like I would be the one who would dare my friends to do something, or they would be the one to dare me. And, like we didn't try to get into a lot of like hurtful play or anything like that, but, things boys do growing up.
That's absolutely. I remember those. Yes.
How about you? What was it like for you growing up?
So I grew up in a smaller town, 30,000 people, called St. Thomas, Ontario. So for those of you who don't know, St. Thomas, Ontario is the home of Joe Thornton and Rachel McAdams. So both of them were there. They're actually both the same age as I am. We were born in the late 70s. And for those, no, I did not know them. I met them, but I don't know them. It was a small town. My family, I actually grew up Catholic. My grandmother, who passed when I was 2, was like the president of the Catholic Women's League. So very religious early upbringing. So we went to church every Sunday. I actually went to Catholic elementary school. It was an interesting upbringing, but you know I grew up with boomer parents, and I had a father who dropped out of high school young because his father died very young, so he had to go work to support his mother because his father didn't believe in life insurance. So, my dad went and worked on the railroad. He went and did just a bunch of odd jobs. So, pretty much throughout my entire childhood, he was always in between jobs and did a lot of sales, but never really had anything super steady. So we were always pretty tight on money. I mean, we almost went bankrupt at one point in my childhood. So it was a very kind of, we were fairly poor, lower middle, if you want to kind of put it that way. My mom always had the same steady job in customer service at a company. But I think, for me as a kid, um, I had to grow up pretty fast with some of those things. So I actually had my first job when I was 9. Um, delivered newspapers for 7 days a week when I was
9
9 years
years
old. Yeah, I
old,
was
eh?
9 years old. So I have
Wow.
essentially been working since I was 9, which, for those of you out there, I'm almost 46
Ooh,
now. So I've been working for a long time. Um,
35 years, I
I
think.
had odd jobs here and there, so it was good. But I think as a kid, teenager, I was kind of a little bugger. Uh, I had some friends that would cause trouble in the neighborhood, and I would kind of just follow them. So there was some broken windows and some, on Halloween we would dress up in black and pretend we were army guys, but it was really just to go out and cause havoc in the neighborhood with eggs and toilet paper and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm really hoping my daughter doesn't get that, but I can certainly spot, I'll be able to spot all the nasty things because, of course, I mean, I had my first beer when I was 13. I was drinking when I was like 16. Like, it was just what you did in a small town. There was nothing to do. So, like, those are the kinds of things that I did. So, I'm hoping I'll be able to spot those things.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
yeah, that was really sort of my upbringing. I had some girlfriends, and there was this one girl that I thought, oh, I'll be with her forever. I was 15 years old, but it was just it's what you did as a small, as a kid in a small town. That's all you kind of knew. So
Did everyone know everyone in that town?
no, that was the good part about it being 30,000. You didn't know everybody.
Yeah.
Though certainly, when I disliked Catholic school. So when I had the chance to go to a public high school, I took it. Because
Mm.
honestly, back then in a Catholic high school, they didn't teach you about contraception. They didn't teach you about evolution, any of that back then. So like I didn't learn about evolution or any of that kind of stuff outside of the church until I went to high school, and I was like, this is a different world. Now I have a very different view on religion. We won't go there because I don't want to offend anybody, but needless to say, it is not Catholic. So we'll kind of go from there. So I think that's really, I mean, kind of me in a quick nutshell. Growing up, uh, very different. So
Oh, that's really cool.
yeah, it
I
was a bit different. So you know,
So you say you broke windows as a kid. See, I was a kid that didn't break windows, but would still have fun. It's interesting
yeah,
how.
yeah. I was kind of a bugger. And I think
Oh, don't get me wrong. I was a bugger too, man. I was like,
my parents knew it.
I got
My parents knew
your
it
parents.
too. So
My poor mother. Yeah, she had a hard time with us three boys, and yeah.
too. So your upbringing, how did that really kind of form how you raised your daughter? Were there any things that from your upbringing did it change how you raised your daughter, or is it changing how you're raising your daughters?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, my upbringing, I've noticed like mentality shifts from my parents growing up. I noticed when we were really young, like I guess because they were like about our age when they had kids, right? So, life was good. Sure, it was busy with kids, but they were always like the social neighbors. We had one neighbor to the left that was a white family. We had one neighbor to the right that was a black family. And I lived on a street that was very multicultural. So we were the kids always like going to people's homes, people's backyards, and just hanging out. We'd be those kids that another parent would bring us home and be like, "Is this your kid?" So growing up, like my parents were very like open-minded and everything. And then somewhere down the road, I don't know if it's when we moved or somewhere. I don't know. Can't really pinpoint the exact time it happened. I noticed that they're I notice in hindsight now, but back then I didn't really notice, but that they started to become very closed-minded. That they didn't really want to share too much with the outside world anymore. And that's what they were teaching us also. So, as kids, you don't really know any better. You listen to your mom and dad and you don't really, share what they ask you to share. And so I think growing up, like it just after a while, it just started becoming more like them and, being closed, didn't share too much information with friends. I had a lot of friends, but I kept to myself a lot. And I feel like, growing up and as adult, that wasn't very healthy. And I wish I wasn't like that. But it was a good lesson to learn because that's something that I'm not teaching my daughters how to be. I want them to be open. I want the lines of communication to always be open. I don't want them to be scared if they make mistakes, failures. I encourage them actually. So, my daughters were doing a bit of homework yesterday and they're like, "Daddy, can you help me?" I'm like, "Try it on your own. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes. I want you to make mistakes right now
Yeah, absolutely.
until you'll get better and better." So things like that. Like I want them to be open. I see them now and I hope it continues that they're very open-minded people. They say hi to everyone and they talk to everyone and they want to play with everyone. And I know that things are going to change as they grow, but I just want to do my best to make sure that mom and dad are always here for you no matter what, whether it's good or bad, we want you to talk to us and, just be open and free. And, that I think that's one thing that I noticed growing up that I don't want to like pass along to my children. I want them to be open-minded individuals.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's an amazing trait to sort of have, be able to do that, and I can certainly relate to that. I mean, growing up, my father was, I guess, what you would call a functioning alcoholic, if that's a real term. He would not drink during the day, but as soon as he got home at night, he would drink, and you never know what dad you were gonna get. So I was always afraid of his mood. So if I dropped a glass or did anything wrong, he was either gonna freak out or say nothing. And I mean, I don't want that for my daughter. My mom was so calm. She was this amazingly calm woman. And I use the term was for both of them. Unfortunately, my dad passed in 1999 and my mom passed a year before my daughter was born. So both my parents have passed away. They were not healthy people. Uh, my dad was a heavy smoker, heavy drinker, ate terribly. Um, my mom had a disease. So, her days were always kind of numbered, really. But, she lived a good long life and had some pretty good quality. But I think really when I think about how my upbringing changed, it's like I don't want to have that temper. And I don't want to like I don't drink anymore. Not that I was ever a massively heavy drinker, but I don't drink. And I never want and I obviously don't smoke and any of those things. So I changed a lot of those things and like my parents, they didn't go to college. They didn't have great, amazing jobs. And I've tried to change all that completely. So I'm one of those, according to my therapist, one of those 5% who get out of their scenario and kind of make something of themselves and do something different. So I've done all that. And we waited so long to have kids so that we were established, so that we could do that. And I think really, the advice I would give anybody out there, if you're struggling or if you're having a day where you are trying to do all those things and you do have and show emotion or, you give in to your daughter, it's okay. It's all right to every now and then people have feelings. And this is something, I've continued to learn that it's okay to have feelings. You don't have to feel guilty as long as it's not something you're doing all the time, like screaming or yelling or definitely like hitting, never. I used to get hit as a kid all the time. I'd get grounded all the time. So it was certainly a very different things. And those are things that really stuck with me that I'm trying not to do any of it with my daughter. Now, sometimes I swing the other way and I'm don't give her trouble for anything, and I buy her anything she wants, but at the same time, I'm also trying not to raise a spoiled brat. So there's that balance of the middle where it's like you have to be firm, but like not completely go over the edge, but at the same time, it's also like you can't swing the other way completely. It is a balance that I try to strike daily, definitely
Every
with my daughter.
every time you say swing and strike, I'm like thinking, what's going on? You talking about hitting? Just
Yeah.
oh no, no. I completely appreciate you sharing that story. Um, that's another thing. Like I remember you just bringing up, like you just talked about feelings, like growing up, as boys and in a boys' household, and always having not boyfriends, always having friends that are boys. You don't really talk about feelings. You don't really like get into that or anything, right? And you always just shove them away. And then as soon as we had daughters and became parents, it's not even about having daughters. It's just understanding, like, as an adult, that all feelings, all emotions are relevant. No matter if you're sad, angry, if you have love, if you have hate, they're all relevant.
Yeah.
And you just need to let them
They
pass
they
because
absolutely are.
they are like pebbles in a stream. They just need to pass. And growing up, we never let them pass. We just be like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And I just like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And you get angry at yourself, and then that leads to anxiousness, and it could lead to depression down the road. But learning this, like, as a parent now, like, notice like all the whole spectrum of emotions that kids go through.
Oh,
it,
it's
it,
absolutely. I mean, it's so different. So, growing up, so I have a brother. He's an older brother, and he's gay. He has a wonderful husband, and growing up, I mean, he always kind of knew he was, and there was this anxiety in him that he always felt different, like a different person. And I remember he told my father, I think he was 19, so my father was still alive, and the reaction was like it was almost like you're dead to me. That kind of reaction.
oh, really?
Yeah, it was not good. And certainly, before he passed, they reconciled, which was great, but like we grew up in a household where like gay is not a thing. There was, I knew I could have told you every racial slur that there was for any kind of person. Like because my dad was this old boomer who was worked on the railroad and you know
Hmm.
it was part of the Optimist Club and it had all these like old like friends and it was just all these old cronies and that's what he knew
Yeah.
and that's all he knew and for me, I'm like, I didn't know any different until I moved out of St. Thomas, and the world is much bigger, and you need to go experience the world, and you need to understand that all of that stuff is not okay. So, like, when it comes to raising my daughter, if she is gay, if she is trans, if she is anything, I never, ever, ever want it to be like she has to come out and it's a thing. I just want her to come home and be able to say, for instance, this is my girlfriend, whatever, or I don't feel right in my body. Like, I don't want it to be a big event. I don't need her to have stress and anxiety over that. I just want it to be a thing. And I think that comes from my growing up and the way that it wasn't talked about. You didn't do that. It was like the worst thing you could ever think about. And I
Yeah.
always think what would my dad think of today's world? And I would like to hope that he would change and be different because my brother is who he is and he's hopefully would help my father be accepting, but I don't know, it'd be different, but certainly for me that is absolutely changed how I'm raising my daughter. I never want her to feel wrong or different or anything. So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like I feel the same way. Like like that's why I want to keep the communication lines as open as I can for, if it ever comes to a moment like that. I mean, like I don't want them to like feel afraid. Like growing up, relationships wasn't really a thing in my household. So if you mentioned the word girlfriend, like it would be like a big thing, even though like we were boys. I think it was just a cultural thing, like, and then moving to Canada and like having just a little bit of a family here and just settling in their roots and growing them and all that. Like they didn't really
Yeah.
believe in, dating. They didn't really believe
They
in
didn't
like,
believe in dating, but they got married. How do
they
they not believe in dating?
well, because from where they come from, it's like arranged marriages, right?
Of course. So that was an
And like
ignorant question for anybody out there. I apologize.
it would basically be like the parents marrying their kids off with other parents. So like,
Oh,
like
so
there
they
would be a community of people and it was who you knew. And like if and the parents would just honestly handle, I don't know, I don't want to call it negotiation, but that's how dating was back then, especially if you lived in a population, a community of Indian people. I know there's a lot more other cultures out there that do the same thing and
wow.
still do. But
Wow.
yeah, like so like dating was not a thing, and so like I always needed to hide myself if I was dating or if I was in a relationship. It would I did test the waters. I did test the waters and say, hey, like if there was a girl at school, I just bring up the word girlfriend and no, it wouldn't.
Oh,
It wouldn't be cool at home. Yeah, yeah. So it was very strange growing up as a dude, and I had to like completely shut that entire part of my life out from my parents. Like I needed to hide it all, and I became really good at hiding it. And so it makes me very good at covering my tracks. So I hope that's one thing I can recognize with my daughters is covering tracks.
yeah. 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 Well, I have a feeling with my upbringing and with how I was, I'm hoping I can recognize a lot of stuff. So we'll see how that goes. So that's been, I mean, it's been pretty heavy for most of it so far, but let's switch to a bit of a positive question here that it's a little more positive. What is a lesson that your parent or, any caregiver taught you that you still teach your daughter today? Daughters, I should say.
Huh. A lesson that I still teach my daughters today. Well, growing up, my mom was always giving. Whenever I brought my friends over, she would be the one to like. She would be excited that like all my friends are over at the house, and they're at our house. So like, I guess she could have a like peace of mind that I wasn't just somewhere else. So she would always be the one that would like, you know, bring over some snacks, some treats, some food, some knickknacks. Like now with grandchildren and everything, she used to work at Scholastics, the in the factory. So she saved up a lot of books. So now she gives all her grandchildren books and friends of her grandchildren's. If she's ever there, she'll give them books. So she's always giving in that sense. So I'm always trying to teach my daughters, the powerful act of giving rather than receiving. It's been a challenge, especially with like 3 to 5 year olds. Like that concept doesn't really
Yes.
make
Nope.
sense.
No, I've been trying. Like, let's give this toy to some other kid. No, the kids, I need it. Of course. You haven't touched it in a year, but yeah, you definitely need that toy for sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I just find like I'm not gonna give up, right? And I've noticed like things that we have not given up on are starting to resonate after like 2, 3 years. So I think that 2, 3 year mark is when you start to see your child's behavior start to pick up on the things that you feel like you've been nagging about
Yeah.
for those 2, 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
I mean, it's another lesson from my mother as well. So, it seems to be the mothers giving the lessons here. So shout out to all the mothers out there. My mom was a very quiet woman. She didn't say a lot, never did. She was never boisterous, but she was always very accepting of people. So when my brother came out to her, she was like, "Yeah, okay, cool. All right. Let's go over here and have this dinner." Like it wasn't a thing. She just didn't make a deal out of it. As a matter of fact, um, later on, my brother and his husband actually ended up living with my mother. And for a few years, my brother went and lived in Toronto, and his husband actually lived with my mother um, to help take care of her back in St. Thomas. And
Oh wow.
they ended up best friends. So, like, when
Really?
my mom passed away, it was as hard or harder on my brother's husband than it was on us, and it was probably just as hard on him. And because he lost his best friend, and they actually ended up like, he took care of her, he did everything, and my mom was always very accepting. I mean, after my dad passed away, I would have friends that needed a place to stay. She just like, yeah, whatever, it's fine, they can stay over. And it was just nothing. She was so giving and caring, and she was just always thinking about other people. But did she ever say those words? Never. It was her actions. And I think for me, actions always speak so loud over
Mhm.
just words, because she never said anything. She never said, "Oh, I accept your brother," or "I accept his partner," or any of that kind of stuff. She just had actions. She didn't really have a lot of negative stuff to say about anybody. She was just the sweetest woman. So I think for me, those are the things that I took from her.
It's really nice. She valued happiness. So I guess like her actions all like follow that.
Very much so. So we're gonna,
That's really
yeah.
sorry, I just wanted to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
Like we're talking about our parents and all that, like it's and we talk about the negatives, but we also talk about the positives. But I think as parents now, I think we look back at our parents and we're like, back before when we were parents, we were like, oh, why were my parents like this? Like I wish I didn't have these parents, or, like I wish my mom or dad was something more like this person's parents or
Yep.
whatever.
Oh
Right?
yeah.
You
Yeah.
remember those? Yeah.
Oh
So,
yes.
but, now looking back at it, like how can you fault your parents for their upbringing? That was their upbringing.
Oh,
That was what they knew. And that was their reality and their perspective of how the world was because of the way their parents brought them up.
it's
And
so
yeah.
true. You know what? And I think I just went through this in therapy. I know I talk about therapy a lot, but it is a huge chunk of my life. And
Oh, go for it.
I faulted my father for years on everything. And really, what it boils down to on the stuff that he did or didn't do or didn't teach me or wasn't like, it was he didn't know any better. So, for anybody
Yeah.
out there who is struggling either with themselves or with, maybe the way they were raised, and obviously I am not a therapist, but I've done a lot of hours of it. It is sometimes they just didn't know any different. So, like you said, it's their upbringing. It's the way they are. They didn't know any different. And sometimes if you don't know any different as a person, as a father, I think, or as a mother, it's go out, talk to other people, do some research, shameless plug, listen to our podcast, and
Yeah.
just like go and learn something different, because that's how you expand your horizons.
Exactly. I think that's a good way to wrap this up because I think, my parents at some point, like I think they used to love to learn as the years went on. And I don't know if it was just wear and tear that us boys gave my parents, but at some point I didn't see them learning anymore. Like they still have a hard time working the computer or a phone. So
I would love to have seen my dad with social media, because he obviously passed
yeah,
before, long before social media even came, or he never really knew computers, actually at all. He bought us one early in life, thinking this is going to be a thing, but he never learned it himself. So it was
yeah.
quite. I'd love to see my dad with the computer
And that just showed that just showed me that learning is just for life, like no matter what.
Yeah,
And if as soon as you stop learning, I mean, there's scientific proof that your brain will actually shrink. And
true.
that's not something, I want to do for myself and my family. So like I'm continuously learning always. And this podcast is one example. Like I didn't know how to do a podcast 5 weeks ago, but we're doing it. And so like I will never stop learning. And that's something I want to pass down. I'll pass along to my kids also.
Still
So
don't know.
sorry.
I still don't know how to do a podcast, but Sundeep just tells me every week that we're recording at this time, and I just talk. So, I mean, I know how to talk. So I guess I know how to do that part of podcasting. But if it
I'm just learning to have a lot more faith in my abilities and, like I want to bring people along like you for the ride. So, I
he
hope
dragged me along
this
for the
worked.
ride, just for everybody out there.
Yeah.
I'm being dragged.
Yeah, Patrick was stubborn. God, it took about a year of courting him to do, not a year, but maybe 6 months to get him to do this. Oh, but I'm glad you did, and I'm glad we're doing this. And it's fun now. I'm having a lot of like fun with you, and hopefully this turns into something, and hopefully we provide value to all our listeners out there. And you tune in, you give us comments about what you want us to talk about. By the way, while I just said that, I remembered we have a Facebook page out there right now. And so like if you ever go on it, Moments of Brilliance, you same logo that we have for everything else. Like it's just our two faces in a cartoon style. If you find us, leave us a comment, talk to us. Like
Yeah.
we even have a Facebook private page chat, which we send out to like friends and family and anyone who we want. So if you wouldn't be a part of that, that's a group where we're trying to build conversation and discussion about, topics you can give us to talk about or anything that you want. And if you feel like you have a story to share, like we would love to have guests on our podcast. So you could be our first guest potentially. So let us know, like drop us some feedback, some comments, and we're here for you.
Yeah, I think that is a great way to wrap up today. We want the comments, we want the stories, we want the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it might be. If we've said something that really resonated with you, let us know. And I think that's important because we're gonna start doing these little podcast extras. There was actually one topic a couple of weeks ago that seems to be getting a lot of attention. One of the clips. So we're going to be next week. We're going to put out a podcast extra all about sleeping in separate rooms. That seems to be a topic that is resonating like crazy. So we're going to talk a bit about that. And from there we'll keep going. And I think the next full podcast we're going to talk about raising kids during COVID. So we've talked a bit about kind of our past and where we're doing, but it's like, now what is it about? How was it raising them during a very different time in the entire world? What was that like? What tips can we give for anybody who's having a hard time, raising them, whether it was through COVID or, there's a lot of sick days with kids. Fall is here. Winter's coming. There's a lot of sick days. A lot of people work. So it's, how do you raise that kid during those times? So I think, Sandeep, any final comments for today?
No, I'm just thrilled to see, we're on our third episode now. Fourth if you count our pilot, and I'm just thrilled to see the progression and the growth of this channel, and I'm looking forward to helping more people along the way. So thank you everyone for listening.
Absolutely.
And hope to see you next week.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next week. Moments of Brilliance, a podcast about life, laughter, and raising daughters.